thank you for joining tonight. So as you have seen, today's topic is incremental data load, which is a very common concept in any data warehousing and ETL environment, right? What is the incremental load, how to do that? There are various ways of doing incremental load, but the concept is same. So what I'll do today is I'm going to show you a couple options and also try to make sure you understand the concept, right? So we'll do two different things. One is clear the concept if you have any doubt or you don't understand it, what is incremental load, why we do that, etc., etc. So why and how. And probably when, because you might say, when we'll do that, right? What is the scenarios? And then second piece is provide an example or demo, okay? Demo or example. We'll do two different approaches. One is using load control table. So I'll create a table, use some entries in there, and then we'll try to use that table. Second one is use load control table in SSIS. Other one we're going to do is our in SQL, right? So using merge statement in SQL, and I'll explain merge statement in details today as well, how we configure this, how we write that, etc., etc. Now I'm going to also explain another topic. It's called ETL versus ELT, right? And what is the differences when you do that, how we do that, etc., etc. Okay, so moving on, clear the concept if we have any doubt. So we're talking about incremental load, right? So incremental data load is it's a very common concept in data warehousing environment. So if you think about if you have built a warehouse and you need to have also a pipeline or an ETL solution built to be able to continuously populate your warehouse, right? So it's not like you built your warehouse one time and it just one time data load in the warehouse. It's not like that, because as your business is growing, as the operation goes on, it will continue to also grow the volume of data. Okay, so let me. It will also grow the volume of the data over the time. That's how the history will be built in your warehouse, and that will help to come up with any kind of based on the historical data, to come up with any whatever the data analysis you are going to do based on the historical data, you are going to come up with some kind of business intelligence suggestions, business intelligence kind of suggestions to the business to which area they need to be focusing on to be able to improve their business operations or whatever the use cases, right? So to be able to do those kind of analytics on the data, they need to build, the organization need to build their data repository, the history. So if I have, think about it, if I just have last 2 years worth of data versus if I have last 20 years of data and I want to do analysis on those data, the more data that you have is better for your decision making, right? So that's what, as an analytics, data analytics or data scientist or team members, you are going to analyze the data, and also you want to come up with some kind of conclusions with the data. Now, if your role is just to load the data, then probably that's not your responsibility to also do the analysis. But you need to know the data in terms of the business your company is in. right? So what I'm saying is overall, you need to be able to, your organization will need to be able to build the data repository over the time. And that will only happen if you have a continuous feed in the data warehouse. So when I say continuous feed, that means some sort of ETL pipeline created, either that is in SSIS or in SQL or any other ETL tool. But you need to have a data sources. So data source can be, any other vendor, third-party provider. Data source can be another application. Data source can be some kind of files generated by different departments, different business team or different data providers, whoever is that. So there should be a continuous data creation based on the operations and the different business teams that you have, right? So you need to have a continuous feed. So what is the prerequisites then? Prerequisites can be, continuous feed of the data. You need to have some sort of data quality checks, right? You just don't want to load the data. Data needs to be validated or quality checked. Now you can build various kind of logics to be able to validate those data. We're not going that part, but we're going to build that kind of that kind of module there. You want to check certain pieces of the data, right? Now and then data needs to be tracked. There should be date, some sort of date to be able to build the history. So think about that. If you do not have any date time appended with your data, you're not going to be able to tell any historical trends on that data. So if I say the total sale of certain product last month. Now last month could be February, last month could be December, last month could be April, depending on which time which time of the year I am, right? But if I say March 21st, 2022, that is a specific date. So the month of March in 2022, so that is more specific. So what I'm saying is you need to have, every business will follow that usually. I mean, they do have those kind of mechanism in place. They want to, whenever they are trying to keep the history of the data, they should have some sort of date in the data platform. Now that's why date dimension is one of the very critical dimensions in any data warehouse environment. Okay, so that's a whole different discussion. But what I'm trying to say is you need to have date dimension in the data or entity, however you put that together. So these are prerequisites. Now, when we do incremental load, so incremental load will only insert the newly created data. So that's incremental load. There are two concepts, right? One is insert. Another one is upsert. So when I say upsert, that means insert or update or insert, however you say that. So basically, when you, in any data warehouse environment, when you, beside loading new data, when you also update historical data, then you are doing an upsert, right? So I'm going to write it down. And also I'm going to send these notes after the class, don't worry. So when you insert newly added data plus update any historical attributes or measures. Insert is when you only load newly added data. So think about scenario, you have a some sort of ETL solution running where you want to only load newly added data. That is, either if you are running a job every hour, every 2 hours, every half an hour, 10 minutes, whatever the scenarios are, right? There could be jobs you're running every 30 seconds, right? Depending on how long it takes to or how the data volume is coming, right? There are other ways to update data in real time, but those are different technologies. But in general, if you think about you're running this job every night, right, and you want to only capture newly added data, that means you can say, okay, anything today after that given date, I want to load into my warehouse. That's your insert. You don't touch any historical data. On the other cases, you have some sort of, let's say you are in retail business, right? You want to um, insert new data, and also you want to update some historical data if there are any changes. For example, if you have a store, right, there are some sales and then there might be some returns, right? So if you have an order, 1, 2, 3, 4 order, and there were 10 items you sold in that order, 7 of them, the customer, that customer, 7 of them, he or she kept, and then 3 of the items were returned. So you need to adjust that order, right? How you can do that? So basically, if that sale was from last week, sale was from yesterday, whatever the date time is, you can do an upsert. That means you want to check if there was any item returns, and you will adjust that in the data warehouse. And also, if there is no, there are some new sales, you're going to insert those. So that concept is basically called upsert. So you're going to do either insert the new records, and also you're going to update any historical changes if that happened. So that's what you do. So now there are various ways you can do, either in uh, depending on whatever the technologies your companies are doing, but either you can do in using the load control table, lookups, all those different transformations. And if the database, the data volume is too large, you might want to go to use merge statement in SQL. Okay, so these are 2 other concepts on loading the data incrementally. Now, let me just separate this out. Okay, so why we're doing that, right? So if I come back to this concept, um, why we do that? So we do that is to continuously, or is to build the history of the data in the data warehouse environment. How? So basically, either we can do insert or upsert. When is basically depending on the schedule, right? So if you based on your data volume, so depending on the schedule or type of business. So if you are in, let's say, in retail business, so retail business means where you have customers are coming very frequently. Your sales are generating, every minute, every hour. So some sort of online business you are in, right? Let's say you have an online store. So customers are coming, visiting the store online and buying different products very frequently. So you might want to run your data sync up every hour, every half an hour, whatever the use cases are. On the other hand, let's say you have business, some sort of, let's say mortgage, you are in mortgage industry. So usually, if it doesn't matter how big is the company is, not necessarily every hour there will be like 100 of mortgage originations for that given company, right? Probably not. 100 loans in every 1 hour, that's a pretty big number. Okay, so that is probably not the case. So it is depending on the type of business as well, right? Type of business. And overall, you want to build the history of the data. That's the reason you are, right? So that's why, so depending on the use cases, you need to continuously integrate your data into warehouse platform. And depending on the data volume, type of business, and the schedule, so it might be every hour or every 6 hours, whatever the use cases. And or maybe nightly basis, right? So midnight every so if you have a business which is 24/7, then it's a different use case, right? If you have a business which has a off business hour, let's say business operation hour is 9 to 5. So most of the cases, then the jobs are going to run to sync up the data at the end of the day. That means probably 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock, or maybe midnight, depending on what is the operational hour. Now, this is the overall use case. So you have, let's say you have a business that you want to update your data warehouse every night, but instead of doing the complete load of the data every day, you want to load only the changed data, which has changed last 12 hours, last one day, one business, 1 week, or whatever the use cases. You only want to update or insert changed data. So that is called incremental load. So you are incrementally loading your data into the warehouse. Pretty much straight concept. Does anybody have any doubt about that concept? What is incremental load? In plain words, if you read the text and books and everything, they will have more definitions you can read through. But in general, from the basic terminologies and the experience, that's what the incremental load is. Yes. Anybody question?
Abdullah, I have one question.
Yes, go ahead.
When we say data warehouse, so there is one thing is batch processing, one is streaming. So streaming is in data warehouse, there won't be any time streaming.
So usually in the data warehouse, there will not be any live streaming of the data, because warehouse is mainly for the analytical purpose, right? So there are two concepts again. You have transactional data, and then you have your so OLAP and OLTP, right? So analytical data. So in the transactional data, mostly you'll have your applications. The front end application will be connected, where user's experience is most important. That means when you go to, let's say you go to Amazon website, you want to buy something, and you click on certain product, you don't want to wait 10 seconds to load that, to be able to load that page, right? So you want to see that right in a second. Even though 10 seconds is not too much to wait, but still we don't want to wait 10 seconds. We'd say, okay, probably my internet is slow, probably something wrong with the website, whatever the use case. So we'll not be so happy using that website. So that's called user experience, right? So when you have an application that is focused or exposed to the audience, you want to see the performance to be faster. So usually your transactional website will have less volume of data to go through, right? Because if you think about warehouse, it will have more data, and if you are directly accessing the warehouse from a front-end application, it might take a little bit time to render the data because of the volume is too big. Now, to answer your question, Usually, data warehouse will not be live streamed because it is not directly connected to the front end application. It is more for the reporting analytical purpose, which do not really need any live stream right away. Right. So you just need probably a daily snapshot. You probably need a weekly snapshot, something like that. So usually at the end of the day. So what was your other question?
I think you answered. I was just wondering whether for data warehouse we always do first time load and incremental
Yeah,
load. There
batch.
won't be any batch,
Yeah. So
but there
I
won't
was
be any streaming.
yeah, I was looking for that word, batch processing. So batch processing or bulk insert, that's what usually you will be doing in
In
terms
data
of,
warehouse.
yeah, in the warehouse. But you need to have a pipeline created. So if even though if it is running daily, weekly, monthly, whatever the use cases, quarterly, you need to have pipeline created, put some data quality rules in there, whatever the business logics, those are the things that are going to be implemented, and then it's going to run as per the schedule. So live stream usually for the front end applications. Some cases, think about that. If you have, you create, let's say Facebook, right? So they use different technologies, but let's say you are posting something on Facebook or Twitter or Instagram, right? And it is getting published right away, and your friends can see them, right? And then your friends can also comment on your post, like on your post, and all this, and you will see that right away as well within a second. So that is like a live streaming. But Facebook also use their own analytics. They don't need that. What is the right away reaction on certain things? So they will probably collect the data based on daily basis, weekly basis, and then they do their data analytics on top of that. Okay. All right. So for this solution to build, I'm going to use one sample file that I have, and I'm going to also use, let's say, couple tables. I'm going to send those create table scripts also at the chat window. So if if you want to follow me, you can also do that. But let me first send you the data file. So this is what I'm going to use. I have this sample file created. Okay, and this is a text file. I don't know if I can send the entire file in the chat window, but let's see. I think I can. So now next thing I want to do is so I'm going to need also a table, right? So let's see, I'm going to use this table. That is a table that I have created. Daily vendor data. Okay, let's see right here. So this is the table that we're going to use. Also, I'm going to use one more table called load control table right here. That should be somewhere. This one.
Sorry, sir, may I interrupt you?
Yeah. Yeah, I didn't see you waiting on that. Waiting. Okay. Yeah, I just did. So, so this is the load control table that you will also need. And then, so basically, if you, let me copy everything over in one file. Okay. Load control daily vendor data. So this is going to be my main table. This is the table will control the load process. So we're going to see two different approaches. Okay. So that's why we need load control table. This will also help you to track or audit any kind of changes that happen to a certain table. Okay. So I'll explain that and you'll understand why we're doing it. The other thing that we're going to do is I'm going to create, we're going to need a package to be created. Okay, so we're going to create a new project, integration services. Let's store somewhere here in my computer. Incremental data load. Class demo today is 03/06/2023. Created a folder. Okay, select this folder, and then let's give it a name, incremental data load. Okay, incremental data load. Click OK. All right, so first thing first is we're going to go sequentially, right? So first approach is let's build a simple package to load the data into that target table from the file. So for that, we're going to need a simple data flow task. So if you are here in this far, you already know pretty much a lot of things about this tool, SSIS. So I'm not going to go any other details on that, but so let's go to this data flow task, and I'm going to use a connection called flat file connection. Since we have this text file, so I'm going to use this flat file connection. And let me find the path where I have saved this file. Open file location. This is where my file is. I'm going to create a new connection. Okay, so this is the file that I have. I can see the columns. So this is coming directly from that file that we just, I also have sent this to you. So if you have saved this txt file, you should be able to connect that just using flat file connection. So I'm going to name these as vendor data. Okay, these are some sample data. So you can come up with any sample just for testing. And I'm going to click OK, columns. I have employee ID, employee name, job title, salary, and month. So month is basically the date, date, month, and year, that format. So, excuse me. So that's what, so we can see flat file source and vendor data. I'm just renaming this. Next thing I need is the target, right? So I'm going to store. So again, we're just, first thing we're building is just the pipeline. Then we're going to add on top of it. So we just need a target, which is the destination, right? So this is OLEDB destination. So I'm going to create a simple connection here. And we're going to say this is new connection to my computer. And the table is going to be the daily vendor data. And I'm going to create a mapping. So insert date is an identity column. It's a default date field. So not an identity, sorry, it's a default, it's a constraint setup. So it will be automatically populated. So I'm going to click OK. And it's going to just simple, right? So what we did is we just created a source and then target. What I'm going to do here is simply I'm going to truncate this table just in case if there is any data in this table. All right. Okay, so if I see there is no, if I see the table, there should not be any data in this table. This is empty, right? So what I'm going to do is simply go over here and run this package. So I can rename this package something meaningful. So I can say load vendor data daily. I'm just naming that package to be a little bit more meaningful. Saving my work and simply going to run this, execute. Now, if you look at this package, I do not have any truncate or delete statement, right? At the beginning of the package, I do not have anything. That means if I run this next time, it's going to duplicate the data, right? So if I look at the table now, it's going to have this 19 rows. So in terms of running that package multiple times, if I run it again now, it's going to have again 19 records. So it's going to be duplicated. So, but what we want to do is load this table and only look for new records. So if I want to look for new records in this table, right, how we can track that? Well, in this specific scenario, if we say, okay, I want to track by employee name, there might be multiple employee with the same name, right? So that's not possible. There should be some kind of unique identifier usually, right? So for this demo purpose, we don't have that use case. But in general, if we want to only load the data based on the date or some sort of newly added data into the file system or the source system, I can use this month column to identify if there is any new data in there. So all this data that we have in here, these are all old data. You can see 2021, 2022. So if I have a data row, which is, let's say 2023, 03, 07, 06, whatever the case is, right? Anything new that is going to be added in the source, we can identify by using this date. That means you need to also have a place to capture the last or the maximum date from the previous load, right? If you understand my logic. So basically, if I want to identify the latest data from the source, I should be able to find what was the maximum date in my source system. And then if we could store that date somewhere, that will tell us that this is the data you loaded last time, and anything after that is going to be a new record. So if I say my source has data, let's say this value. Now next day, new date is, for example, 2023 03 07. So if I know this was the last time max date loaded, and anything after that is going to be your new data. So that means we need to be able to capture this maximum date. Okay, so that's what we want to do. Now, to be able to do that, we can go back and update our load control table. So if we look at this load control table, so what I did here in this load control table, let me show you this table first. If I run this, you will see there's some sample records, and then we have this. So process name is nothing but your data feed, data that, or the table name. So we're saying daily vendor data is nothing but your process name. Load control date is, you can put some default date. Process execution date, that you can see this was last executed today sometimes. And then data load flag is equal to 1. So that means the data was loaded last time, whatever the time. and then number of rows loaded. You are also capturing the number of rows you have loaded last time. So this is going to drive the entire incremental load process. This date process execution, this is going to tell you when was the last time data was loaded, and anything after the date that you have in the table is going to be treated as the new record. So I'll show you. Actually, that will make sense if you are confused a little bit. When I show you, it will make sense. So this is the table we're going to use to control the overall load process. Okay, so we have this daily vendor data, we have load control, and then process execution date. The process execution date is going to be the time when you ran that package, ran the job. Load control date is going to be the date is coming from your source file, and then flag if it is completed or not, and then number of rows, etc., etc. So if you have created this table, the script that I have sent you, if you want to load this one or few rows, I'm going to send the script as well. Let's see. Give me 1 second, trying to give you guys this information with the data itself. That way manually, you don't have to manually do that. This one, sorry. I need to find that other option. Okay. All right. So now this is going to generate the schema with the data. Okay, I'm going to send this to you guys at the chat window. So just you can execute that. That's going to give you the data and also the tables. So if you just change the database name and run that, it should work. Okay, so going back here, if I go to the package, so first thing we need is we want to check when was the last time your the data was loaded into the load control table. So basically what we need to check is get the data from load control table. So if I go to the management studio, yeah, so what I am going to find out is the max date from load control table. So here, load control date. As you can provide as last load date, where you need to say the process name. Process name equal to this daily vendor data. So now it's going to only give me the last loaded date into this table. Now, if you're doing it for the first time, right, you might want to do some tricks here, and I will come back to this later on. But this is your max date. That means this was the last data you have Anything after that, you're going to treat them as a new record. So I'm going to copy this simple statement, go back to the package, and I'm going to bring and execute SQL task. And I'm going to say get latest or the max date for the load control table from the load control table. Now, what we need is if we go to this connection and we're going to do this SQL statement.
Abdullah,
Yes.
looks like the script you pasted is not complete.
I did not go entirely. So let me send
Oh,
it to you in because I think it's just stripped some of the this one you're talking about, right?
yes.
Okay, so let me do that. So if I
Only insert is required.
okay, so I'm just sending that insert statement. Yeah, probably just did cut off 1 or 2 lines. Okay, so it should go now. All right, so yeah, sure. If I go over here, so this is your connections. Now we are expecting single row return from this select statement, right? So we're going to say single row, and we need a variable to store that data. So I'm going to say, come back here, click OK, and I'm going to open this variable and add a variable, say, max date. Okay, and then I'm going to put this as a date time data type. Now this is going to be by default put some values over here, but it's going to be overwritten during the process. So I'm going to go back to the SQL, execute SQL task. And here, since you said this is going to return a result set, you need to store that result set in that variable. So I'm going to click on add and then just put the 0. And this is the variable where I'm going to store my result set. I'm going to click OK. Now, next thing I need to do is I need to check this every time now it's going to run. It's going to put some sort of, it's going to first get the maximum date, which is, this is the query that we have written. It's going to give me this data, which is 325/2022, which is coming from the load control table. Now, if your load control table is empty or there is no daily vendor data process, you are loading this table for the first time, right? This is going to return, let's say you have vendor data 2, right? And there is no process name like that. It's going to return a null value. So what are you going to do in that case? Your package might fail, right? So we're going to address that as well later on, but let's come back on that topic in a few minutes. So I'm going to go back to the package. Now inside your data flow, you need to put together some sort of separator, right? So we can use a conditional split inside. So here you'll see conditional split, and I'm going to connect this conditional split, and inside here I need to put together some sort of differentiator, right? So if I say I have a date coming from the source and I have a date in my load control table, if I compare them and if I see the source system has date greater than the load control table, I will treat that as a new value, new data. So what I can say here in the condition, I have this column called month. If the month is greater than the variable, which is max date, then I'm going to So it's complaining about the data type. So we're going to fix that in a second. So if this is the case, then the output is going to be new data if this condition is met, right? So it is complaining about data type, which is you have this is coming as a date. I'm going to just click OK, cancel this, and just show you the variable that we created is a date time, right? And then the data is coming from the source. It's, you see, this is DTSTR. So that is the thing that it was complaining. So we can either create a data conversion here, or we can also put together something inside the conditional split, whichever is easier for you guys. So let's add a conditional data conversion in here. And I'm going to say, let's convert this month, make this to be DT date or something like that. Yeah, DT date. And then I'm going to say this is month and put some sort of, say, DT underscore date. Click OK. Now if I connect back, now go to the same place, and now I can see month date is greater than this. Oops, not this one. You can also find those different operators here. You will see equal, greater than, less than, right? So you can plug and drag and drop here and max it, right? So now you can see the red sign is gone. So here I can say new data, and my default output I can say which does not meet the condition is going to be data, old data. So we don't care about old data, okay? So I'm going to click OK. Now in the OLEDB destination, I'm going to only load my, can you tell me which one I should be loading?
The new,
Old,
the old
new,
data.
New data.
new data, yes. So I'm going to need the new data to be loaded. So if I now save this and overall explain in a few seconds. So I have this first one, which is an execute SQL task. It is what it is doing is simply it is loading, getting the last, the max value from the load control table, right? So basically that load control date, which is last load date, coming from the load control table for the table name or process name is called daily vendor data. And I'm going to click OK here, right? So, and then we're storing that value in that variable that we created, max date. And then inside the data flow, what we did is we added a conditional split, and the conditional split is basically comparing that two dates. If it is one of them is smaller, another one is bigger. So the bigger one is the new data. So we're going to load them. And then to be able to convert the data type, we just added a data conversion, right? So that's all we did. So now if I run this package just for testing, and as you can see, I have this first execute SQL task completed. In the data flow task, I have 19 rows coming from the source, and it's going all the way, but you can see there was 0 rows added into my destination. So that is good. That's what we want, because we don't want to load the same data again in the table. So if I go back to the SQL Server Management Studio and I check this table, daily vendor data, I should still see 19 rows. There is no new data added. Now for testing, if I go back to the file that we created, we are using as a source, and I'm going to add one row here. I'm going to say this is 11, name is RA, and let's say manager, and whatever the things, we keep it as it is. And then we're going to say month is, instead of 3/25/2022, I'm going to change this to 3/26/2022. Okay. Now I'm just going to save this file. File, save, close. I don't want to close this one. Let me actually save this if I don't, because I don't want to accidentally delete that. Class note. Okay, just saved it. All right, so if I go back here and I see I still have 19 rows. Now I'm going to go back and run the package again, because we want to see if it recognizes that new record that we added. Now I can see one new row. Go back to my table. I can see this is the row we just inserted. Nothing has been done on the other data. So here it recognizes the new data loaded. So this is your simple incremental load. Now, if you look at this, your load control table, there's a few more things that we want to do with this load control table. And you can see in this load control table, we have to have something that will update this load control table, right? Because this load control table, if we do not update this table every time we are running the process, it will not have this. So that means basically we have to have some sort of process that will also just update your load control table every time your data load is completed. Otherwise, it will have some static data, right? So you want to say, okay, data load, if it is completed, or how many rows you inserted in the last time. This is what you want to update. So first thing you need to do is, this data load flag is also going to give you the flexibility to check if your package has failed. So basically at the beginning of the package, you're going to mark this data load flag to be 0. And then you're going to be able to update that at the end of the data load process. So let's not complicate the stuff overall. So all you need to do is, after your data load completed, you need to update these 2 columns for sure. Especially your load control date is very important, because this will drive your new data load process, right? So if you understood that, so let's go back to the that part. So we want to update the load control table, and it's going to be part of your package. Once you are done with the data load, you need to have something at the over here in this part. Either you can do an OLEDB command inside the data flow somewhere here, or what you can do is, in the control flow, everything is done, you can just have a execute SQL task here and say update load control table. Now, the way you are going to do that is simply you're going to go back here and write an update statement. Okay, so let's do that. Update this, and I'm going to just say this is LC load control, and then we're going to say set the value. Let's do this, provide this alias. Actually, I'm going to do little bit differently. You can do other way as well. Just say update this, say that and that, but there are multiple ways you can write this update statement. So I'm going to say update LC from load control, and I'm going to say set, instead of doing other way, we can say set load control date equal to I'm going to, somebody send a message or what? Okay, now I thought somebody's in the waiting room. Okay, so what I'm going to do is load control date. So I'm just going to, for now, I'm going to say get date. We'll come back to this. Okay, and then we also need to update rest of the other other attributes, right? So I'm going to say we also want to say process execution date equal to get date. And then I'm also going to say data load flag is equal to 1. And then I'm going to say number of rows loaded. Okay. So number of rows loaded, you need to find a way to update that. So there are multiple ways you can do that. Either you can do somebody raising hand or something. Okay, because I'm seeing some pop-ups here. Okay, so a number of rows loaded. Either you can do in the write some sort of SQL query, or you can also just track how many rows were new, and then you just map that in the from the variable. Okay, so we'll take a look on that part, but for now I'm going to just put this number of rows loaded as let's say just 1. I'm just putting a placeholder. We'll come back to this. Okay, now load control date, if you think about this table, vendor data, so I need to be able to find this load control date, which is the max date from your target table, whichever the last value, the max value you loaded last time. So if we do something like that, max month as last loaded date. So this is going to give me the value, which was 3/26/2022. So, but if we look at the daily vendor data, the data that we loaded, this was the last data, right? 3/26. But if you look at the current load control table, it has value from one day before, 3/26, because we did not have an update process. Now what we can do is we can take this and update this load control here. We kind of write a subquery to update that. Here we're going to say this. So now if you see this process, the process execution date is the timestamp when your package is running. So you can say get date, that's fine. Number of rows loaded, we can update that from a variable. So I'm going to, if I run this, is going to update this load control table. So, but I don't want to run it from Management Studio. I want to run this from the package. So if I copy this over and go back to my package, and here if I go to this execute SQL task and we do this, right? Now, if I click OK, now one more thing. So this your update statement is not returning any result, right? So you can just keep the result set to be none. One more thing we want to do is parameter mapping. So we can also do some sort of dynamic way of updating. So let's remove that. So I want to update this. I want to update this number of rows on the fly because I want to recognize how many rows are getting added. So if you remember, there was a concept called parameter mapping where you can have a question mark and get the data from somewhere in the in your package. So let's try that out. Let's test that out. So instead of number of rows to have some static value, I'm just putting a question mark. So I'm going to take this over there in the package. And here I'm just going to replace that. Now I have this question mark, right? So what I need to do also, when I have this question mark, I also need to have a parameter mapping, right? So I'm going to click on add. And then I have one parameter. So parameter name, I'm just going to keep it as 0. And then my variable, which variable is going to map that parameter, right? So I need to have a variable that is mapping to that parameter. So now I need to actually create a variable. So I'm going to click OK for now. It's not configured properly. But what I need is, if you go to the data flow, I can add something called row count transformation over here. So row count is going to give me the number of rows that we are inserting. And I need to also have a variable created, say number of new rows. This is going to be an integer. So I'm going to go back here. Now it's going to say my variable. So this variable is going to hold how many rows are getting inserted. Okay. So now if I go back to the control flow and over here in the parameter mapping in the execute SQL task. So this is going to be my number of rows and the data type was integer, right? So this is going to be something different. So I can find that, let's say float, large integer, long numeric. I can put probably numeric. We'll see. Okay. So now I'm going to click OK. Now let's do the same thing. I'm going to go to the file and add one more record. Okay. So I'm going to go here and put like 12 and let's say when and change this date to be 27. Okay. So now if I just save this file and save my package as well, and I'm going to run this package. And let's see, everything ran as expected. I had 2 rows come in actually. And if I go to the control flow, and I'll explain why we have 2 rows, okay? We should be saying 1 row. So here you see everything is expected the way it is. Now I'm going to go cancel these, go check my table, okay? So 2 tables we are going to check now. One is my load control table to see if this value has changed. This value has changed, but we made a mistake. Nobody told me that, right? So here in the update statement, we should have a where condition. Because see, it updated all my other processes. It should not be the case, right? So we should not be touching these other tables. So what we should have done is saying where the process name is this. Because when we're loading the data for daily vendor, we are only interested about this first row. We should not be touching rest of the other rows, right? So that is the mistake. So I'm going to go back and update my package again. But if you think about, just ignore this mistake, we'll fix that. But if you look at the first row, now I can see the load control date is, which is coming the max date from my table, the source data 327, the process execution time, the number of rows we loaded is 2, and the data load flag is 1. That means it was completed. Okay. So what we have to do is update this SQL statement in the package to be able to avoid this updating all the tables, all the rows. We just want to update the first row. Okay. So what I'm going to do is go back to the package one more time, stop this, and just change these. Yeah. And also I'm going to do one thing at the beginning of the, where we have these get the max date from load control table. We're also going to add some more thing in this SQL statement. Okay. Where you say, you see, this is a data where you are just getting the max date. We also want to update this load control table, and we want to do simply, we want to make this data load flag to be 0 at the beginning of the load process. Before it is starting to load the data, we want to say data load flag is 0. And then once it is completed, the data flow is done. We want to mark that to be 1. Okay. So what I need is, I'm just going to do the same update statement. But this time, what we need is, we only want to update one column here. We only want to mark this data flag to be 0. And this. And we need to make sure we are doing this for one table only, right? So one row only. Now I'm going to take this, put this inside the same SQL statement. You can create one more execute SQL task, but we can just do in the same SQL. So we need to put probably a go to be able to do statement ending. So I'm going to click OK, click OK. Now let's run this. Just want to run this real quick to see if the load control. Okay, so it failed, right? So what is the reason? We can see the progress, and it is saying something wrong with the no result set, result row set associated. So something wrong with the SQL statement. Okay, so let's go over here, and what we need is this update statement. We can put that probably before. Yeah. And then we can say go. Click OK, OK. Save this. Let's try to run it again. Just I'm going to run the task only. So it failed again. So let's go back and remove the go statement from there. Probably that is complaining about that go statement. If that, okay, so yeah, that was complaining about that go statement that we're using, right? So you don't need go. So now this was successfully completed. So what it is doing, is basically it is doing two different things. One is it is updating the load control tables to say the flag to be 0 at the beginning, to say data load is not completed. And then it is also getting the max load date from the same table. So two different SQL statement is running inside. Now I want to check what happened to the table real quick. If I run this select statement, and you will see what happened the first row. Now I have this data load flag is 0. So that means if I have my package failed somewhere in between to be able to load the data, right? And somehow my package failed, you will see your load control will have 0 flag. That means it's not completed on that given day. So that's the purpose of creating your load control table, to track what is happening. Now, if I go and run the whole package now, what I'm going to do is add one more new record in that same file. And I don't think we'll have time today to discuss the merge statement. So I'm going to change these to be 13. And change this to here, date to be 328. File, save, close this, okay? Now I'm going to save my package and I'm going to run this. Okay, now I can see one row loaded. I go back to my load control table, and now I see this is marked as one row added. This is the load control date. The max date was 328. That's the latest date. This is the time when you loaded the table. Now, if I go back to the data table, actual data table, which is my daily vendor data, and then you will see the newly added rows are coming here, right? So you can see this was running, this was loaded 855, 847, 847. Now, if you are running this for the first time, right, you will have no data. So if I say I want to truncate the daily vendor data, the whole table is truncated. Now, if I run this, the load control, it says 328, right? And some of the data that is coming from your source is going to be, now if I run this part where we say load control date, if the load control date, so this is, the table is null, right? So it is showing you there is no data in the table because we just truncated them. How do you handle that if that is the case? We also have to make sure we add some sort of logic in here. If that is null, then we're going to put together some sort of is null or something, right? Even you say there is no data in the, so now let's try to run this package. So before we get there, we want to run the package to see how it behaves, okay? So I'm going to run the package. See, even though my table is empty, there are 22 records are coming, but it's not loading anything, right? So you can see 0 records are coming, but technically I should be loading all the data. The reason you have all the data that is coming but not getting loaded is because your load control table is also it has the data from the last load. So here you can see your load control date is null because you ran that and there is that the table is empty and you can see number of rows loaded is 0. Process was run this time, but you do not have any data loaded, right? There is no data coming. So what we need to do is, if this is you are running this for the first time, you need to also say something like here, if this is null, what you want to do is you want to say is null, or you can also say coalesce, either way is null. Then you want to put some default values, which is something like, let's say 1900 0101. Now if I run this select statement, instead of null is going to put this value. So this is what we need to put at the beginning of the query. So where we have this getting the max value from the load control, that's where you want to put this. The update statement needs to be done. That logic right here, load control, this need to be replaced. Now if I click OK, save it. Now if I run this, now you will see all the 22 rows are getting loaded. If I run it next time, now if I check the load control table, you will see this is getting loaded, 22 rows that you loaded just now, right? Now if I run it again, it should have 0 because I'm not making any changes in my source system, source file. So let's run it again. It should be 0, right? Let's check the table. Load control, this is 0. Okay, so that's how you can use load control table to manage your incremental load. And now this is only doing an insert. So we are right on time. So I don't think we'll have time to cover the merge statements. I'll leave that for next class. So we'll cover that in the next session when I come. I'll take it from here and discuss about the other options. But if I recap the overall things, what we tried to do is we created a package, and let me also pull my notes that we created for you. Let's see, incremental load class node, right? So what we tried to do is we created a package where we wanted to track what are the new data coming from the source system, and also store those different metrics which can help us auditing the data load process. If the data load is completed, how many rows you loaded, what was the max data you loaded, etc., etc. So we created a load control table, right? So load control table is actually helping us to manage the flows. And if I go back to the package, over here, we tried to do a few things, right? So first, we did get the max date from whatever the tables that we have. And then we also, one thing that we did not test is, I want to test it real quick. I want to intentionally fail this package, okay? Intentionally fail this package means I'm going to, let's say, quickly, the table that we created, worker, month, date, okay? So this date column, I'm going to intentionally add some bad data. So you will understand why we added this data load flag, right? So I'm going to intentionally, in the month, I'm going to intentionally add some bad records in one of the rows, okay? And I'm going to treat that to be a new record. Okay, and I'm just going to do this. And yeah, so I'm going to intentionally try to fail this package. So let's go ahead and try to run this one more time real quick. I know we're a few minutes over. Just stay with me for another few minutes. And my package failed, right? Which I wanted to do intentionally. Okay. Now, if I check this table, load control table, and you will see what is the reason I added this data load flag. Now it was marked as 0. Now next day you said, okay, our packages ran. I do not see any new data was loaded into my data warehouse. What is the reason? The first thing you want to see, what is the flag in this load control table? If it is 0, that means something wrong with your package. So you need to go back and take a look at the package. If it failed last night, if the job ran or whatever the case, and then you need to find out the root cause. In this scenario, what we did is we intentionally added some bad data, right? That's why the package failed. So I'm going to fix this data now and try to run that again. And I'm going to stop this and run the package again. And then I'm going to show you the load control table again. All right, this is completed. Let's take a look at the load control. And now you can see is 1, and then 1 row was loaded, which is expected, right? So if you go inside the data flow, you can see 1 row loaded. All right, any question related to what we have covered so far? Yeah, it is probably for some of you, it might be a little confusing. If so, you can recap the videos. So wait for another probably a week or a few days. The recording is going to be available, and I'm going to send the class notes in the chat, means the Colaberry chat, not over here in the Zoom chat. So I will post these discussions in that chat. So find that out. And I can, if it is too much, I can also put that in the Basecamp where you can get all these files. All right, thank you everyone for joining. I hope to see you guys again in future. And wherever the phase you are in the in IPBC or the project, continue pushing hard, work hard. And if you have any challenges, feel free to reach out to us. And at the end of the day, we want to see you successful, right? That's the whole purpose of this mission that you started. So stay focused, stay motivated, keep working hard. We'll see you in next session.